Welcome back to Naval Action and episode 49 of A Letter to the King. If you're new to the series, A Letter to the King is my attempt to keep you appraised of what's going on Euro PvP1 as far as port battles and other biffing is concerned. Let's have a look at where we were at the end of last week. The pirates had sort of done a bit of a port swap, a bit of a strange one up here on the north side of Haiti. The Danes had retaken US provinces that had been taken on the south. The French were the only member of their alliance clinging on to a port in South America. Britain had declared this an impenetrable fort. Islamabad was changing hands more frequently than cheap money. And as normal, Haiti's western side was constantly being harassed by the British and their allies. Let's have a little look at the alliances. So the alliances are holding steady. They hold steady now. It's the bugs fixed. So there was a lot of gibbering going on as to what we should call the various alliances. And it's really hard to sort of, what of America, the Brits and the Dutch got in common apart from their hatred for the other alliance. So bacon is loved by all three of these nations. The Dutch love their meats with plenty of sauces on. The British, of course, are favourite for bacon butties. And the Americans make milkshakes out of bacon. So bacon is one option. When I look across the other alliance, pastries. They all like their bread products. Bread products are popular in all of these countries, so pastries could be a nickname for this alliance. But these don't seem insulting enough. Obviously, we could have the goodies for the British alliance and the baddies for the Spanish, Franco, Swede, Dane alliance. But tragically and rather boringly, the alliance names are probably best described and known as the Western Alliance and the Eastern Alliance. It doesn't quite work because our cloggy friends on the map are slightly more Eastern than perhaps the French. But nonetheless, the Western Alliance and the Eastern Alliance shall be the simple shorthand for the two sides as they're pretty much drawn now. Let's have a look. So there was 15 port battles this week, and it all pivoted the week, really. The mood for the week all pivoted from one of the early battles, which we'll get to in short time. The week, as it always seems to do, began with attacks on Les Cayes by the British, or by the Western Alliance, which was repelled by the Frenchies. And, of course, Port-au-Prince, was once again attacked. This time it was an American-raised flag, or American-raised hostility, and once again it was defended. So these two ports here, they're probably quite hard to sail into with the amount of shipping that's sunk outside of them. They're beautifully easy to screen because you've got the free ports here where both nations can bring ships out of. And of course this free port is Le Navas, and it's a pain in the bum to try and sail out there at any time because every man and his dog's got ships in there, so you can participate in the deep water PvP. So they're being well defended, but we'll come to that at the end of the show. But the week really pivoted on this one battle, and it was the 317th attempt by the French, or as some people would call it more accurately, the 11th attempt by the French, to take St. Lucie, Castries. Now, although this was a French-raised hostility, it was predominantly a Danish fleet. There were some other members of the alliance in there, but it was predominantly a Danish fleet. And one thing the Danish fleet have recently done is they've started essentially attacking a little bit earlier in the day. They did this around Haiti and elsewhere this week. And by doing so, the Western Alliance doesn't have its stalwarts on. So this was a little bit more of a thrown together group. However, it was still commanded by one of the primary British commanders. And it looked in the bag. Never has a battle been more won than this. The Brits, at about the 50-minute mark, had 978 points, which means they were one ship. If they sunk one more enemy ship, they would have won. Or if they'd have held the three circles for about another 3 minutes, they would have won. And it was at this point that arguably one of the British captains had a bit of a brain fart, got himself involved in a sorry sort of boarding action, blocked a couple of ships. As the boarding action ended, one of the ships that was being boarded was in fire shock. An explosion happened. The Brits lost a ship and 2 were quickly disabled. Now, that alone shouldn't have done it, and it was a bit of a brain fart, but that alone shouldn't have done it. But the Brits then kind of fell apart a little bit and got a bit grumpy monkeys with each other, and in doing so allowed, first of all, the Danes to take one circle, which slowed the progression of the British score. They were still 800 odd versus 400 odd. But then slowly, as the pell-mell sort of really broke down, the battle really broke down, the Danish, or the Eastern Alliance, managed to actually grab up all 3 circles, and with about 10 or 15 minutes left on the clock, they actually managed to win the battle. So it has to be seen, irrespective of what caused it, it has to be seen as the greatest comeback win we've seen to date in naval action. And it was one that caused a little bit of upset in the British Empire as fingers were pointed at each other. In fact, the alliance, I should say, as fingers were pointed at each other. And it was a defeat not well managed, to the point, and this is a disaster for me, that the in national news, the Post called Good Port Battles and PB Results turned into a bit of a poop fight. And the moderators have decided to close it. So this is a calamity, because this is my main source of detailed battle reports. So I desperately need the moderators to come up with an alternative. I'd prefer a highly moderated thread where only videos and screenshots of the outcome are allowed, and nothing more than a "well done, sir" can be published in that thread. However, at time of going to press, we've lost that thread, and it's a disaster. But this was a huge win for the Eastern Alliance. Prior to this week, they'd been pushed back on all sides, and other than the Spanish's stalwart retaking of Islamabad on multiple attempts, they were losing heavily down in the south. The British had held the French next door to their own capital, which was causing locals lots of pain as they sailed around trying to swindle silver out of Castries, and we're getting a lot of ships sunk. And although there'd been a little bit of a regathering for the Eastern Alliance, with the Danes retaking parts of Haiti and regathering the ports that the Americans had taken, it was all going a bit wobbly for the Eastern Alliance. And this was a big victory for the French, or indeed the Danes in this particular case, sailing under a French flag. And it was a big loss for the Brits, and morale was down heavily on the western side. And of course, at the start of the week, we'd had one of the large Dutch clans, as I mentioned in last week's report, had moved to the US, so they were still setting up. So the alliance was a little bit wibbly wobbly, and things could have gone amiss. Now, the Danes capitalised on the roll, and they retook, it's the north of Haiti here, Puerto Plata, I think. So the Danes retook this from the pirates, and this is a good video that you can still get your hands on. That was up there. It was actually a good fight, a good tactical fight. And I have to say, other than this one here that was, just a mess from a British point of view, and a glorious victory, brilliantly won victory from the Danes' perspective. This was, I don't know why I've got the Swedes there, but anyway, it was the Eastern Alliance. This probably typified most of the battles in the week, in that there wasn't a lot of shipping lost. There was a fair number of ships lost, but it wasn't like a massacre. But what it was it was quite a tight fight, but one of these fights where inches make the difference, because one side got 2 or 3 ships up. They managed to own the circles and hold numbers in the circles. And we're seeing the tactics really develop now, and as soon as one side gets a numerical advantage, either because of ships they've capped, and in this case I think it was 2 or 3 ships got capped quite quickly, or because the wind has put your opponent into a poor position, captains are far savvier now at grabbing up and holding circles, and just doing some simple tactics like sending damaged ships back to protect a circle, and then allowing the stronger ships that have been holding it to come and join the main fray. And so this battle probably typified most of the port battles other than Castries this week in how they were won. So the Danes are now back, and they've eaten half of Haiti again, so they're doing well. The French repelled the Dutch at Caracas. I don't think the Dutch got a full fleet in. I think it was like 21 on 25, and it was a bit of a first go with the new clan set up, and the French easily defended this. The Dutch were never really in control of this battle. And then we moved on to the French attacking Pampatar on the back of the win at Castries and on the back of the defence at Cumana. And this, again, was a very good win by the French, and under a French flag, I should really say, because, again, there was a fair number of Danes in here. But this was a good battle, and again, it wasn't a battle that involved 1 million ships being sunk. This was a battle that involved good captaincy, good leadership, winning by 2 or 3 ships, but using those numbers to dominate a couple of the circles. And so it was hard fought for the Dutch to get Pampatar back, and within a couple of weeks it's been lost to a French flag. Again, I think this was an early-ish battle, so again the Western Alliance sort of in that early afternoon period during the week are struggling to get the hardcore numbers that they would normally get, and as I say, with the Dutch recently losing one of their dominant clans to join the US forces, and they're not properly set up like yet. As you know, it takes a while when you change nations. This has been a good win, so again a comeback of sorts, if you like, by the Eastern Alliance. The Spanish then had to repel the Americans, who turned up both at Islamabad, as they always do, because it's a weekly journey for them, but they also hit the port on the other side of Islamabad. What could it be called? Cotta del Kalos or something like that. And these were great battles. These are fourth-rate battles, and they were both reasonably well contested. I have to say, A's was very easily defended just because of the good tactics of the Spanish. It was another battle that didn't sort of end up with a massacre on one side or the other, but again was just good captaincy. Once you got that numbers advantage, and of course the attackers have to push, they have to take the risks, and when they lose 2 or 3 ships, or if they lose 2 or 3 ships, then this can really end up as, if it's well captained, it ends up as a comfortable win. So in both of these cases, the Americans were repelled. And then an oddball, I've got no reports on this at all. The Brits, for no reason that I understand, raised hostility. This is called Filipina. This is on the south side of La Habana. And I don't know, no idea what happened here, other than the Spanish easily, or not easily, but no idea, the Spanish repelled the Brits at La Habana. It was the first time we've seen port action there since the end of the Three Admirals War. Andros, which is becoming a weekly event now as well. It's very interesting. A lot of these ports are being hit repeatedly. I suspect that's because people learn the harbour layout and they sort of know what they want to do the next time they go into them. So, over here, just north of Belize, there's Salamanca. I know the Brits have tried for Salamanca twice, and the thinking is it's a pain in the bum port to try and take, so it's not the sort of port that people are going to go back for unless they're up for a bit of a laugh, to be honest. The chances of taking it are very low, because it's just, you've got to sail up this horrible channel. It's screen as heaven. Or with the current ROE, it's screen as heaven anyway. And one of the things I've noticed recently is that some of the Eastern Alliance in particular is now, its anti-screen fleet is often at fourth-rate battles, an entire first-rate fleet, as we saw down here around Pampatar. So you've got no chance of stopping that screen. Fourth-rate battles, I don't mind with the first-rate battles being screened by other first rates, but fourth rate battles screened by first rates, or shallow water battles screened by second rates, is a bit crazy, because like 3 second rates can pull a full 25 shallow water fleet in just using their BR, which is rather silly. It's sort of like a bear fighting bees. However, this was a great battle, this shallow water battle. They always are. It's kind of like watching dodgem cars going around. The Americans held it reasonably securely, but there was a lot of ships not far off sinking on both sides by the end of that one. And then at the weekend, the Brits got double hit, both at down here in Orinoco, but also they got hit at the same time in the Windward Islands. And in both cases, it was majestic screening. I'm not sure who was leading the screening down here in Orinoco, but some sort of new military genius rising through the ranks. 2 layers of screening, one to stop the anti-screen and then one to pick up the main fleet. The Brits managed to pick up the main fleet. They used about 8 or 9 fourth and up to second rates to pull in the 25 fourth rates. Now in the future that probably won't happen. So on the patch notes at the moment they're talking about changing the BR. I spoke about this a little bit last week, and when I get more information I'll describe it in more detail. But fundamentally, I don't think the screen would have been able to pull with the forthcoming rules. Although there was a handful of second rates in there and a handful of third and fourths, I'm not sure under the new rules if it would have been able to pull. But anyway, we managed to pull in the entire attacking fleet. Again, it was predominantly a Danish fleet, although it was under a Swedish flag. It did 2 things. It basically gave the wind was terrible for the defenders because it was blowing straight into the port, and when the British took it, they took it with this type of wind. If you remember, this is a port where all the circles are in a line, so if the wind's blowing into that line, by the time you get to the second circle, the enemy hold it, and then you're struggling to stay in that circle. You're absolutely ripe for fire ships, and you're absolutely ripe for boarding, because you're sailing to them directly into the wind, so you're doing like 5 knots, so one little knock on the nose and you're up for a good boarding. In this particular battle, because the screen was so marvellously led, it meant that the 2 things for the attacking force, one, even though they had good wind, they probably got in 5 minutes after the battle began, which meant the Brits had managed to get into, actually there's a lot of Dutch in here, had managed to get into, it was predominantly Dutch actually, now it's coming back to me. So although it was under a British flag, I think it was predominantly Dutch captains, but they managed to get into the centre circle. So essentially, as the Eastern Alliance entered, they were already sort of 2 circles down and 1 to capture. And due to the just splendid screening effort, it meant that the Eastern Alliance entered much further away from the port. So if you've been in a port battle, you'll know that when you click on the swords or you click on the town, you get a circle where you have to join outside of, but you can join from anywhere. You can join from the Atlantic Ocean if you can free camera to the town and click on it. But they entered a good distance away, so by the time they actually managed to sail to the first circle, they were already like 400 points in arrears. And although it proved to be quite an exciting and contested battle, at one point I think there was 6 ships all grounded shooting the pants out of each other on the west side of the bay. The Eastern Alliance commander managed to sail all the way into the closest circle to the British port and then get himself killed by the fort. And one of the things that you may forget in a fourth rate is the big forts, not the towers, the big forts, they're firing like 68-pound cannonballs at you. That's like being hit by fridges. And he was a bit damaged by the time he sort of run through the gauntlet, and he was trying to capture A, and sadly for him, by the time he got close enough to capture A, the fort opened up on him and took the rest of his side off and sort of gave him more leaks than a Welsh greengrocer. So that battle ended up being won by the Brits. I don't think the Eastern Alliance ended up getting their full fleet in there. It might have been 21 ships, because a couple were killed on the way in by the unbelievably well-managed screen. Meanwhile, a similar story, although obviously not as good a screen, happened at the Windward Islands, where the British screen basically forced the French to enter at the wrong point. So what it meant was that the French basically had to sail into the wind all the way just to get to the first circle. And to be honest, by the time they got there, bar some crazy bonkers lunacy by the Brits, which they weren't going to serve up again, they were never going to capture enough circles or kill enough ships in the time remaining. So to some extent the French kind of gave up on that, and the battle was over quite quickly. In fact, it was over really before this battle had got going. So this was good for the Western Alliance. They were attacked on 3 ports simultaneously and managed to hold them all, and then they went for a bit of glazing on the cherry, on the icing of the cake, by having a crazy bonkers crack at this shallow water port here. This is Texas, or Houston, and it's the worst port in the world because you have to sail across these shallows and up this inlet, and basically the Spanish parked half a dozen second rates out here. And I was quite impressed actually with the numbers they had, because they had a full 25 ship fleet inside of beautiful heavy rattles. But they also had, 10 captains outside in mostly second and fourth rates, a few quicker ships, a few chase ships, frigates and the likes. And the Brits got to within sight of the port, but like a million miles away from entering. And they kept getting tagged. Now, because they were in little faster ships, they could run away easy enough. There was 1 or 2 losses, but most of them would get away. And although a dozen brave souls managed to get into port, most of us joined in a different postcode to the nearest circle. There was one crazy captain who did manage to get into the guts and somehow survived, despite fundamentally sailing his heavy rattler through all 3 circles. And in fact, he might have been in a Navy brig, and he sailed it through all 3 circles and was still alive for some inexplicable reasons. I think the Spanish were drunk, and they kept missing him. Or they might have been letting him to try and take a circle to make the battle last long enough to sink the mad 12 who'd made it in, the dirty dozen who'd made it in. But anyway, it was great fun. It was a bit pity we got screened out, and although they're doing the new ROE, which will certainly help silly screening for the first rates, it still means that for the 25-man shallow rates, your combined BR is probably worth about 4 second rates. So it's still going to be a real problem getting in with shallow water ships. And I think the only way to do it is going to be to have a first-rate screening fleet, to be honest, that can pretty much pull in every man and his dog who's trying to defend in the screening actions. But it was another good defence, so the Brits were vanquished there. And it basically means that the only wins of the week went to the Eastern Alliance. However, British and the Western Alliance, the Dutch and the Americans, morale is high again, and a demonstration of that is the fact that they've set up a 5-port mega attack in response to the 3-port attack orchestrated under different flags but executed predominantly by the Danes. The Brits, the Americans and the Dutch under various flags are attacking Les Cayes, Port-au-Prince, Ponce and both sides of Haiti on the north and south side of Haiti in a 5-pronged attack, which is all quite close to each other, as well as an attack, I think, a couple of hours before that all kicks off on Cumana from memory. I'm pretty sure it's Cumana. And in the middle of all that, I believe the Swedes are going to have a go at... where are they going to have a go at, Jeheil? They're going to have a go at Trinidad, I think, which is down here between Orinoco and Bridgetown, the Windward Islands. So it's all on for young and old. There was 18 port attacks or something like that this week. I think the quality of tactics in them has really gone up. There was the start of the new port battle seemed to be capping Bonanza. Most people have learnt how to counter that, so most ships are somewhat geared to defence, or people are more savvy of it, so you don't see the mass cappings we saw in the first couple of weeks. Most fleets are now smarter at protecting the circles in general. And we're seeing a combination of things occasionally, and at the moment the Danes are doing this, they're sailing in with a solid 20 who fought together a lot and then a few makeups. With the early attacks, the Western Alliance are having to draw together players who perhaps are a little bit more unfamiliar to working together, and I know up here that the new Dutch and the American clans were learning how to work together. So these probing attacks on the Spanish, I think we'll see they're returned multiple times now with this new improved US capabilities. And although obviously I'd like to see the whole map appropriately red and green and orange and get rid of all of these pesky other colours off the map, and that would be a much lovelier map, and His Majesty would be most pleased. His Majesties, they would all be most pleased, and whoever's running the US this week. However, I have to say I'm quite pleased that the Eastern Alliance has pushed back. It was looking a bit bleak for them at the end of last week, with just Kumana holding out on the south side here. So, you know, the game is afoot, as we say in Biffo Town. Now, last week I did speak about the fact I was going to be doing a port tactics video. Now, given it was with the captain who lost Castries, and that didn't go down particularly well. Incidentally, this captain has a very good winning record prior to that. It really wasn't the time, because the battle we're going to review is a battle from the end of January, which was a battle in Castries, which was an excellent battle to watch. And it really wasn't the right time to do it. My poor YouTube channel would have been festooned with all sorts of terrible comments about why didn't you do this week's Castries and why did you speak to that captain. Well, I'm looking forward to do this video. One of the things I'm strongly in favour of is hearing from lots of different captains. So I'm going to do hopefully one this week if we can make our times work. He's in Europe, I'm in Australia. And then I'd really love to do it with some of the captains from the other nations. I know I've been really impressed in recent times by some of the leaders from the US side, and I know the Cloggies have got a couple of really good leaders. I also have a lot of time for the Eastern Alliance captains. There'd probably be a language barrier, certainly with the Danish captains, because my Russian's a bit wobbly, I have to say. But I'm hoping I might be able to snaffle up a French leader, sir, if you're listening, and maybe even a Spanish if I could get an interpreter in with me. And the goal will be we'll get a video, we'll get the person who did the video to give us permission. I've been pointed in the direction of a tool that will allow us to both watch the video at the same time, and we'll just chew the fat over how you approach, what you're looking for, what makes things work, what doesn't make things work. So I'm hoping we'll be able to bring this replay. It's from the 23rd of January. It isn't the most recent one. Why don't you do the most recent one, Jeheil, where you lost? Maybe one day I'll do that with the captain who won it. But I'm hoping collectively we can all learn. I'm going to ask you to put your big boy pants on and not get all parochial about whether or not you like the particular individuals. There's lots of individuals from history who were on the side of the baddies, if you like, or you might not have liked their particular way of doing things, but you can always learn from them. This is what the great naval captain Sun Tzu teaches us. Let's get to the tally of splinters, sail and blood. And as expected, you'll see that the Western Alliance stocks fell, with the Brits losing 3 ports as the impregnable fortress of Castries fell, given I described it as an impregnable fortress of Castries in last week's video and said it will probably fall now. I take full responsibility. So the Frenchy stocks are up. They snaffled up a total of 7 ports with Castries and Pampatà. The Danes stock are up as they moved in on the east side of Haiti at the cost of the pirates. And the Dutch and the Brits bring us the balance of losses to predominantly French-held flags. So that's it for this week's Naval Action, episode 49. That's almost a year of Letters to the King. I hope that served you well. I was chatting to one guy who'd been stuck in hospital for 4 weeks after, in classical captain fashion, I think he had one of his legs chopped off or knee surgery or something. And he told me that he kept up to date by watching Letter to the King. So there you go. That's enough. All I need is one happy viewer. So here I am serving the disabled seaman, as it were, in hospital. So give us a like, give us a subscribe. I will see you on the oceans, and I will catch you.